Hi, this is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I'm here from my home office and I hope I don't spin in my chair. I'm here to talk about what I've read in the last couple of weeks since I last did a video, and I also want to talk a little bit about a very sad thing that happened this week. Singer-songwriter John Prine died, and so I want to talk a little bit about his influence and in my life and what his music and his presence in the world meant to me over the 40 years that I've known about him. So first I'll talk about books. It was I've had a pretty good reading spate lately, which is nice. It's good to have some kind of diversion. Let me talk about what I read. The first book I want to talk about is The Return by Rachel Harrison. This is a horror novel. I remember seeing that it was available from my library, and I just clicked on it because I liked the cover. And I didn't actually know it was a horror novel. That's really not what I read. But anyway, I checked it out and I started reading it, and I really like the voice. It's a first-person narrative about a girl who it's a very convoluted setup here. So she is one of 4 friends, and they're in their late 20s, and some of them are more successful than others. She's not very successful. She dropped out of graduate school. She's been having an affair with a married man and living in Buffalo, New York. And she's got friends that are a lot more successful than she is. One of her friends disappears and is presumed dead. One of her friends disappears. She goes hiking and she never comes back, and she's presumed to be dead. They all think she's dead. There's a funeral for her, and suddenly 2 years later she comes back. And she's slightly changed. No one's seen her. They've talked to her a little bit on the phone, and they decide they're going to have this reunion of the 4 friends in a hotel that is a themed hotel. So it's very overdone in theme rooms, and as though a set designer went in and created this like fantasy land hotel. So that's the premise. 4 friends reunite at this hotel, and right away it's got shades of The Haunting of Hill House, because the descriptions of the rooms and what's happening and the perceptions of the main character as she encounters these rooms is very heightened. And I mean, you get a sense that the hotel is a character of its own, and some of the staff from the hotel are also doing their best to accommodate the guests, but also they seem weird and seem scared. And all the 4 friends get together, and the friend who had disappeared is completely changed. Her teeth are falling apart, and she's got stringy hair. She's extremely thin, and she's like a half of herself. So, and that's the premise. I'm not going to give any more of it away. I really liked the first half. I think it totally kind of lost steam in the second half for me, but I did enjoy it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. So if you like horror novels, you may enjoy this. It's Haunting of Hill House, and it's also a little bit of The Shining and some of the sensibility and humor of Severance. It's kind of a hybrid novel. The next book I'd like to talk about is This Side of Murder by Anna Lee Huber. This is a historical mystery set right after World War I. It's a cozy mystery where a whole bunch of people who are lightly affiliated with each other come to a seaside island estate for a party to celebrate an engagement. And the main character is named Verity, and she's a new widow. She's deeply mourning the loss of her husband. He was killed in World War I, and some of the people who are guests at this weekend were served under him, and some of them are they're suffering from the horrors of war, and that war in particular, with shell shock and amputations and depression. And so it's good in the sense that the writing is so great. I really like the voice, I like the character, and I liked that the downsides of war, which of course there are their upsides, but the downsides of this war are very evident in the characters. And she's a little bit of a feminist in that she doesn't like to put up with men's condescension. And so there's a lot of like gender dynamics and gender roles. So I really like that part of it. I did feel that the mystery itself was a bit convoluted, and I didn't really love the ending, but that should not distract you from reading it, because the good parts outweigh the bad parts, and I am interested in seeing what the next book holds in the series. I started reading A Fanatic Heart by Edna O'Brien. I'm reading this with Sean, and we read the first story called The Connor Girls, and this to me was a fantastic story. It starts out where you're hearing from the voice of a young girl who has idolized these Protestant girls in a Catholic town. It's all Catholics except for this one family that are Protestants, and these girls in this family, and they're not girls, they're women, they're in their 30s, but they're called the girls. And so the young girl who's just kind of idolizing them and really wanting to befriend them and know everything about them, and her mother wants to invite them over and creates this big meal to entice them, and the girls refuse to come in their house. And so there's a tension between the Protestant Catholic divide in society, and one of the girls makes a bad match and thinks she's going to get married and doesn't, so she's kind of in disgrace. And anyway, you're seeing in the first half of the story these girls, these women, going from an elevated status to kind of a very questionable status. And then there's a hinge in the story, and the story flips over, and the narrator, little girl, becomes a woman and makes a marriage that is questionable to her family. So, I mean, the whole thing is on this hinge, and everything that she was watching these Connor women do, now she has the same loneliness and exile from her own family because she marries someone outside of the religion. So I thought it was a brilliant story. I can't wait to keep reading more from the collection. The book I'm reading now, I think, might be a 5-star read. I'm halfway through, and right now it's a 5-star half for me. It's called Writers and Lovers by Lily King. It's the story of late 90s, this girl who's nearing 30, this woman, here we go again, this woman who's nearing the age of 30. She wants to be a novelist. She's writing, she's living the writing life, but she also is totally broke. Her mother has just died. She has no money. She has crushing student debt, and she's a waitress. So she has to work a lot for very low pay to try and just pay off the interest on these student loans and write a novel at the same time. In the meantime, she is dating men that are kind of and then there's possibilities of better relationships, but we don't know what's going to happen at this point in the story. But I love the voice so much, and I can't wait to see what happens as we get through the second half of the book. So fingers crossed, and if you get a chance to pick up a book, if you get a chance and like books like this with a really strong female protagonist, and it's all in her first-person narration, it's kind of funny, it's sad, there's a lot of past and present back and forth as she's recalling things that happened in her past, but I love it. I think it's just brilliant. Okay, so those are the books I've read and am reading. I don't know what I'll read after this, so I won't go any farther in talking about that. I won't go any further into that. You'll see if and when the next time I make a video. But I wanted to talk a little bit about John Prine dying this week. I did feel that he was probably going to die when his family announced a couple of weeks ago that he had the coronavirus. He's 73. He is in very poor health. He's survived 2 bouts with cancer and was a heavy smoker, and just all of the risk factors he had. And I was pretty sure that this is what was going to happen, and it did. And just very sad, because he was a very influential singer, songwriter presence in my family life. My parents were his age, or my dad was his age, my mom's just a little bit younger, but when my parents were married and young, they were able to see him when he came to Denver, like the very first time. And my dad was, you know, fancied himself a musician. He taught himself to play guitar, and he had a good singing voice, and so he loved music. He had a very expensive, we were poor, but he had a very expensive stereo system that we were not allowed to touch, and a very extensive record collection, and we were not allowed to touch his records or his stereo. And he had a acoustic band, his circle of friends that were all musicians, and so he loved John Prine music, and they went to see him, and I think they even sat down and had a beer or something like that. But he would write all of the lyrics of the songs that he wanted to play in these little spiral notebooks, and he played, you know, the band played the John Prine songs, that we also listened to the albums all the time. And I think when I was still in elementary school is when the first time they took us to see him in concert. And so our entire lives were influenced by having this music, having my dad be a musician. My parents split up, but my dad still continued to play guitar when we'd go visit. He loved music. We went to the concerts when I was a kid, and then later I went to all the John Prine concerts with my mom. We went to the one, I think it was year before last, he came to Denver for the last time and played at the Buell Theater, which is like our big theater where plays come, where Broadway plays, you know, the touring companies come. So it was a big venue, and it was so fun to see him at the Buell doing his Tree of Forgiveness tour, knowing all the lyrics to the songs. And you always get a feeling when you're a fan of something that you're the best fan, and I know I've had that little weird feeling, was like, no, you can't possibly understand how much I appreciated and love this person as an artist, and just, but of course that's silly. Their fandom is not, you shouldn't be measuring yourself and your fandom against other people's admiration and love for a musician. And I found that since he's died this week, just that really special feeling of finding other people that you admire that also liked him, and so you have that connection. And I think that's what booktube is also about a lot of the time, is we read these books, we love them, and we want to find other people who loved them just as much as we did. We don't really want to hear somebody tell us why they didn't like something. I think that if you're gushing over something in a video and then someone comes in the comments and tells you why that person is horrible, or why that you don't like that person, I don't know that that's necessary, and I think it's probably counterproductive. And you can make your own video about why you didn't like something and give somebody else a chance to skip it or watch it. Anyway, that's my slight rant about just why do you have to, I'm probably going to edit this all out, but anyway. I do remember that I got into a very big fight with my dad about the meaning of the lyrics of, there's a song called The Great Compromise, which is an anti-war song indicting the United States for the Vietnam War, because a lot of John Prine's early music was anti-war music. He was in the war briefly, I think, before he became a mailman, so he knew firsthand what it was like to fight in Vietnam. And so this song, the first verse goes, I knew a girl who was almost a lady. She had a way with all the men in her life. Every inch of her blossomed in beauty, and she was born on the 4th of July. And it goes on to, it's like a metaphor for the draft and the horror of war. And I remember getting into a very big fight with my dad about the meaning of those lyrics, because I was, you know, telling him that I understood what it meant, and he told me I was reading way too much into it, and I should, you know, be less, you know, don't try and analyze the lyrics and try and assign meaning to them. And I have no idea why he was acting that way, because it's like clear as day that this was an anti-war song. But I guess that's one of the times when you realize that your parents may not know everything, and may not, and even when they think they do know everything, because my dad did think he knew everything. He was pretty conceited and arrogant at times. So we did have that in common. And another memory I have is in 1997, my mom and I went to see John Prine at the Paramount theater in Denver, and we went to dinner. There's like a little New Orleans style restaurant next door to the theater. Then we went to the show, and it was a really long show, and it was like close to midnight when we got out. And when we came out of the theater, it had snowed like 2 feet. It hadn't snowed at all when we went in, and then when we came out, we were in like a full-on blizzard that incapacitated the city. The streets were so inundated with snow. I had on a white jean jacket. I didn't have a coat. And we couldn't remember where I parked my car because all of the street signs were all snowed over from the wind and the snow. And so I'll always associate that, like, that was such a great concert, and then coming out into this crazy blizzard. And we were actually laughing and scared at the same time. And we did eventually find the car, and I did drive it through like feet of snow that night to get home. And so that was a good memory. The topics of John Prine's songs, I don't think I understood what they were about when I was a kid. There's a song called Donald and Lydia, which is about two young lovers. He's in the army, and she's like living at home with her parents, reading magazines in her bedroom. And the song is about how, you know, they're not together, but they're making love at night, even though they're 10 miles apart. I had no idea that that was a song about masturbation until I was like 20 years old. And then I'm like, oh, I get it. That's what that song is about. But the tenderness and the loneliness and the connection that they had through their fantasy life, I mean, it's pretty novel, right? There were lots of songs like that where I probably had no idea the depths of the loneliness that he was writing about, and just the joy in finding love and communion with each other through sometimes funny and sometimes pretty tragic songs. And he did have another anti-war song called Your Flag Decal Won't Get You Into Heaven Anymore, which was kind of a novelty song, but it was easy to memorize. And my sister and I were singing it in the backseat of my great-great-aunt Grace's car. We were sitting there waiting for something, and we're singing this pretty scurrilous song, about anti-war song, and she lost her mind. She whipped around with her finger, and it's like, don't you sing that goddamn song in my car. My father fought in the war, you know, in the Civil War. So she's talking about the Civil War. I think her grandfather fought in the Civil War, and I've never seen somebody get so mad. She was kind of crabby sometimes, and this happened, but she was furious, and we never probably ever dared to sing that song in her car again. But I'm really going to miss John Prine. I am so gratified that we still have his music, and I'm still reading tributes and watching videos, and I'm going to leave a list in the comments of my 10 favorite John Prine songs. And if you're at all curious because you don't know about him, look them up if you want to. He'll add something to your life, I think. And anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm going to miss you, John. And I also am thinking about all of my friends on BookTube out there who are struggling, scared, isolated. I hope everyone's safe and being safe and doing all the things you need to do to be safe and stay well, so we can try and weather this, because this is very rough, right? So thinking of you all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.